Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. My name is Giridhari and today we're continuing with our Gita Mahatmya series. The Gita Mahatmya series is taken from the Padma Purana, and we see Shiva describing to Parvati the glories and power of each chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So today we're doing chapter 15, and we'll see this very interesting story where we'll see how karma can be intercepted by the Lord's mercy, how karma and mercy have an impact in your life. So here we go. It starts like this. Sri Shiva said, "My dear Parvati, now I will tell you the glories of the 15th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Kindly listen carefully. In Godadesha, there was a king called Narasingha. He was so powerful that he was able to defeat the demigods. The commander of his army was known as Sarabherund. He was very greedy, and along with the prince, he planned to kill the king and become the ruler of Godadesha. But before he was able to carry out his plan, he got cholera and very quickly died. After, he took his next birth as a horse in a country known as Sindhu. That horse was very beautiful and was very fast. He had all the qualities of a prize horse. One day, the son of a very rich man of Godadesh saw that horse and decided to buy him with the intention of selling him to the king of Godadesha. After having purchased that horse, he took him to the capital of Godadesha. When he reached the city, he went straight to the palace of the king and requested the guards to inform the king of his arrival. When he came before the king inquired from him, "What has brought you here?" The businessman replied, "O king, in Sindhu I found a horse of the highest quality, and its equal cannot be found in the whole universe. I paid very much money for it." The king ordered, "Bring that horse immediately." The horse was very quickly brought before the king, who became very pleased with the high qualities of the horse. After having examined the horse, the king paid the businessman whatever amount he had requested without thinking twice. After some days, the king decided to go hunting, riding that horse. He set off to the forest where he saw a deer, to which he immediately gave chase. Following behind that deer, he followed in every direction it turned. After some time, he left the rest of his party far behind. After chasing for a long time and becoming very tired and thirsty, he stopped to take rest. He tied the horse to the branch of a tree, and he himself sat down on a large rock. So he's sitting down. Of course, the horse was his commander who wanted to kill him and take over the throne. So the horse, the reincarnated commander horse, is there, and he's sitting on a rock. After a little while, he saw a piece of parchment, a piece of paper, blowing in the wind and land next to him on that rock. On that piece of parchment was written half a shloka, half a verse of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The king started to read it, and as the first sound came out of his mouth, the horse fell down to the ground and gave up that horse body. He attained a transcendental four-armed form and immediately sat down in a flower airplane, which had come from Vaikuntha to take him to that transcendental abode of Vaikuntha. So he started reading the verse, and immediately the horse that soul who used to be the commander, who had become a horse, gave up the horse body and was taken to Vaikuntha. We've seen in many of these stories the flower airplane, the flower vimana comes down and takes these souls. That's one of the ways souls get taken to God, is by these flower airplanes. Very interesting. The king noticed that close by there was a beautiful ashram, which was surrounded by fruit trees. Sitting in that ashram was a brahmana who had complete control over his senses. And also you'll notice that whenever you have this perfect yogi, they always mention complete control over the senses. So that's a quality we all have to develop. This very much recommended in Bhagavad Gita. The king offered respects to the brahmana and with folded hands inquired from him, how was it possible that my horse was able to attain Vaikuntha? The brahmana, whose name was Vishnu Sharma, replied, O king, previously you had a commander-in-chief of your army who was known by the name of Sara Birumd. He had planned along with the prince to usurp you from the throne. Before he was able to, he got cholera and died, after which he took birth as that horse. By chance, he heard some words from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and attained Vaikuntha. So what we learn here is, for one thing, look at the commander. He had this great position, a very powerful position, a wonderful position. The commander of the army of a great king is a wonderful position, but instead of being grateful and happy in his situation, he got greedy, lobha. Krishna says lobha is one of the gates to hell in the Bhagavad Gita. And so he got lobha, he got greedy, he wanted more, and he didn't care about right or wrong. He was willing to completely go against his code. His code, dharma. Dharma of a commander is to protect the king. The whole commander, an army commander, that's his whole dharma is to protect the king. And he was going to go completely against that dharma and kill the king for greed. So this is an example of how violating completely your dharma. So because of that, he immediately started getting bad karma, and so he even died of cholera. Because you start accumulating bad karma when you act in a dharmic way, bad karma starts coming. Problems start arising, directly and indirectly, from that sinful behavior. So he immediately got cholera and died. But because his karma was to serve that king, he took birth as a horse. Now what happens as a horse? You don't have that much choice. The whole point of a human life is that you have more choice, more power. In animal life, we have less choice. You have restricted. That's why you take birth as an animal, because you couldn't handle the freedom of human or higher life, so then you have to have a restriction imposed on you. It's like when we put people in jail, because it's like they're restricted. There's so much they can do. They have their hours, they have a set space, there are bars, so everything's restricted, because you couldn't handle the freedom of open society. So that's how karma works. He got the restriction of an animal body, of a horse body, and then he was still serving the king. So he continued to serve the king, but now in a much lesser form. So that's one thing we learn. But then, what do we learn here is the question of mercy, of merit, of just God's mercy that can come to you. Is it random mercy? Some people would say it's random. But I don't say it's random. I say it's an accumulation of past deeds. So that commander-in-chief, even though he had a bad mentality, in the past he must have cultivated very good spiritual life. He must have cultivated his spiritual life, gotten a certain point, and then fallen, become interested in power and in karma again. But he had all this accumulated spiritual credit. And then Krishna makes the arrangement so that you get the opportunity to be again in the path of spiritual life. That's what happens. Once you take to spiritual life, once you've asked for shelter, Krishna will take care of you. Not just in this life, forever. Because you're asking forever now, so it's going to be forever. So even if you use your free will badly, and you get caught up again, and you forget your spiritual life, you get caught up into your material life, and then karma kicks in, and you're going around these different births, but you ask for shelter. And once you've done that, that's it. Krishna's going to help you out. So in this one, he was so advanced previously that he just needed to hear these few words of the Bhagavad Gita, and that was all. That's all he needed to go back home, back to God. Notice that the king didn't have so much spiritual credit. The king was reading the verse, but he didn't get liberated because he still had work to do. He still had spiritual work to do. So he gets to stay behind. So what does he do? The king offered his respects to that Brahmana and returned to his capital and again read what was written on that parchment. So the king didn't even bother learning the whole 15th chapter, what to speak of the whole Bhagavad Gita. He just stuck with that little piece of paper. He's like, I'm just going to read this one half verse. You know, if this one half verse worked so well, I don't need the rest of the Bhagavad Gita. He was just sticking to that one parchment, one half shloka, half a verse of the Bhagavad Gita. After a short time, he installed his son as the king of Godadesha and himself went off to the forest. But then when he went off to the forest, he decided to do it properly. So there he recited regularly the whole 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and very quickly attained the lotus feet of Sri Vishnu. So the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is wonderful, very powerful, wonderful verses where Krishna teaches his position. You can understand the position of God in chapter 15. So it's a very powerful chapter. Very much recommend that you study the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and also attain Vaikuntha. So that's it. Have the rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love.